To find additional episodes of this program, as well as other content, visit eaglemountain.tv.
Hi, everybody. Today we're going to continue the building blocks of the prophetic. And today I think it's a really easy teaching, okay? What it requires of you, if you want to grow in the prophetic and add another building block to your understanding of receiving from God, is that we're going to talk about the language of the senses. This is something that you need to be very aware of. Most prophetic people, or people you feel that are very prophetic, are very much aware of their five senses and what they're receiving, because the five senses are receivers, okay? I mean, you receive, like your eyesight receives everything you see, where you're going, where you're walking, your hearing, the old adage, when you're crossing the road, stop, look, and listen. You're using your senses. And in the prophetic, you need to be aware of your senses. Many people just assume that God is going to overwhelm you in some way, somehow, and speak to you, okay? And that's not necessarily always the way God works. Remember Elijah, okay? The Lord wasn't in the mighty voice, the mighty wind. It was the still small voice. And many times I find personally, the Lord speaks in a still small voice. The Lord speaks in the stillness. And the quiet. So you need to start to be aware of when you're ministering or when you're trying to hear from God, you need to start to be aware of your senses and what you're receiving through those senses. So I'm going to give you a couple examples today that might help you understand this principle more. Several years ago, I was in prayer, and it was in the intercession on Friday morning that we've had for the last 30 years. And I was laying prostrate on the stage, okay, and in prayer. And all of a sudden, I heard these bees up above me. And I thought, oh my, there's bees in here, right? But it was a bunch of bees. So I thought about it, and I come home and I call my son in Kansas City, and I said, Paul, I heard all these bees, when I was in prayer today. And he says, yes, mother, the beatitudes, see how God was trying to cause me to hear what he wanted to incorporate in my life in the prayer and how to pray. That beatitudes that we would be instead of do, okay? And so that's an example of hearing, okay? But there's also examples, like several years ago, I was at Morningstar and I walked into this large teaching at their university. There was probably about 400 young people there, big in the grand ballroom of Morningstar. And I was overwhelmed with the smell of like roses, or I can't describe it other than roses, okay? And that's an earthly understanding of this heavenly smell. It was the presence of heaven in that room. And I could prophesy out of that the Lord, the presence of the Lord was in that room, okay, because of the smell. Many times you'll smell like, I've been in church and I've got this horrible smell of tobacco. and no one around me are smokers. Okay. So I know right away that the Lord's speaking something about an addiction and probably tobacco, because or many times I can smell a skunk, and there's no skunk in the room either, but it definitely is a pot smoker. And so the Lord's giving you a word of knowledge through your smell, okay? That God wants to deliver somebody there from tobacco, from pot, okay? Many people might not think that they can get addicted to that, but they're very addictive substances. And, but you'll smell these smells, and they're not on you. Okay. So the Lord's speaking that. Many times you'll feel things through your feelers. Your fingertips are great. You know how I've talked about the fivefold ministry. Many times you'll get tingling. Okay. And like I said, colors, you'll actually see colors on your fingers. For instance, you'll see a purple on your prophetic finger, which means that someone, maybe you're around praying, ministering, and you see this purple on your index finger, means that they're a prophetic intercessor. So you can speak into that, into their lives, that, oh, the Lord showed me that you're a prophetic intercessor. Several years ago, I've received a word that there was this little eyeball on my pinky finger. Okay. And in other words, somebody saw an eyeball on my little finger. What that showed them through seeing that I was a prophetic teacher. So be aware of your senses, not just your eyesight. Many times we think that God will only speak to us like through visions or seeing something, but that's not necessarily the way that he always speaks. Many times he's going to speak through your other senses. Sometimes you'll taste something, a metallic taste, which isn't good. Okay. It's the demonic, and it will be a metallic taste. Many times you'll smell sulfur, letting you know that there's a demonic presence around in your vicinity. Okay. So you need to be aware. You need to not just say, huh, and ignore your senses, but the Lord will speak gently to you through these senses. And this is where spending time with the Lord, spending time in his word, as you're receiving in your senses certain things, okay, then as you have that relationship with the Lord, then the Lord will show you and expand to you what he's trying to say to you, okay, through those senses. Remember, we talked about the building blocks. You'll build one block upon the other. So you get something in your senses, or one of your senses, and then you can say, well, Lord, what are you saying? Many times then he'll add another building block to that, so you can see clearer of what he's saying. Daniel chapter 7, and Daniel kept looking, and Daniel kept looking. He kept seeing these kingdoms. He kept seeing these kingdoms, but he kept looking until he saw what God was stood up, and the ancients of days stood up and decreed. Okay. So you need to not stop with the first thing. And a very immature prophetic person will get a drop and stop there. Okay. Woo, I got this. Okay. But the Lord wants to expand that. Okay. So keep looking, okay, to what he's saying and what he's trying to tell you, and build upon that. Okay. Next, I want to talk about a bubble word. That's what I call them. It's a Nepal prophet. It bubbles up. It's a spring of living water. Many old-time Pentecostals did this. Bill Hammond, taught his people to do this. Okay, it is a time when the Lord moves upon you. Many times, like in your worship, in your praise, in the congregation, then there's this quiet lull where God wants to speak. And many times he will bubble up like living water, like bubbles that will come up out of you. And if you ride that, then you can start to prophesy on that. Okay. And it takes a step of faith. Okay. Yea, my people, today I'm in your midst to do a great and mighty thing. As I've promised you, I will part the Red Sea before you, and you will walk through on dry ground. Whatever's coming out of you, and it will bubble and flow up. But again, you're going to have to stir that up, and it will take faith on your part to speak that out. Okay. And so what you need to start to do is, guess what? Just do the stuff. Stir up the gifts that are in you. And in your local church, this is a great place to practice. At least it should be. It should be a place where you're loved, you're accepted, and they know that you're young. Okay. I don't care how old you are physically, but they know that you're just stepping out in faith. And you know what? That's a great place. Home groups are a great place to start to stir up the gift that's in you and to start to practice these things. Step out in faith, okay? The only way to please God is through faith. And so step out on the waters. What are you going to do? Sink and the Lord going to pick you up? That's the only way you're going to learn. John Wimber used to say he was a fool for Jesus. And guess what, everyone? That's what you got to be. You just got to be, okay? So I right now I'm thinking about Bobby Connors was at our church here a little while ago, and he had brought a banana from his breakfast, and he started eating this banana as he spoke. So prophetic people, can get things a lot of different ways, and he was getting a prophetic word for somebody as he ate that banana and the very taste of that banana in his mouth. So you just need to do it, everyone. We're a peculiar people anyway. Next, I want to talk about tongues and interpretation. This is a common gift of the Spirit that should be operating on our church. Sad to say that many people don't move in this many anymore. Okay, you need to start to be aware of times in the service where that holy hush comes. That's the best way I can put it. You've been in worship, you've been in praise and worship, and then this lull comes. It's a quietness, it's a heaviness, and many times you'll feel that bubble up in tongues. And you wait. If somebody else doesn't interpret it, then you interpret it, okay? That's where you're going to put probably the other building block of the bubble up prophet to come out of you. It's not a frightening thing. It's just a stepping out of your comfort zone to start to move in those times where God wants to move and speak to his people and speak to you. Many times in my personal devotions, I'll be praying in tongues or walking through my house loudly praying in tongues, and I will get the interpretation of what the Lord's trying to say to me. And so this is something you need to practice at, you need to be aware of, and you need to not let it shut down in your church or your churches. This is something, I tell my people all the time, stir up the gift that's in you. You've got tongues, use them, The next is visions. And I love to talk about visions because I'm a seer. And of course, seers have visions. And many times we think that this vision that you get is like a movie picture that just comes in front of you and you can't see anything else. It's just there rolling in front of you. But most visions are not that way, everybody. I like to talk about several types of visions and make you aware of them so that you can look. Remember what I said, Daniel chapter 7. Daniel kept looking, okay? So the first type I want to talk about is internal visions. Years ago in the charismatic movement, Mel Torrey, he's an Indonesian man, wrote a book, okay, and it talked many times in there about God in every one of his believers has put a TV screen. And you need to look at that TV screen and see what God's trying to show you and say to you, especially when you're ministering. It never hurts to stop what you're doing, no matter who you're ministering to. Be quiet and look. Close your eyes and look and see what you see internally. The next kind of vision would be an external vision. This is really interesting because that's when it's out in the open. Somebody else might not see it, but you see it as plain as day, as plain as you're looking at me now, is that external vision will be to you. Several years ago in prayer, most of the time, a lot of the prophetic will come and teach you. The Holy Spirit will teach you during your prayer session with the Lord. And so many years ago, I'm getting up. It's summer. It's in July. It's very, very hot. So I'm walking across my living room floor and I'm going to open the window to try to get some air. It's like 5 a.m. It's real early. And so I'm walking toward this window and all of a sudden there's this arm. Yeah, you heard me. An arm hanging in the air. And all I could see was the top part of the arm and then the bottom. I couldn't see the hand, just this arm. And it's hanging as plain as day. And so, of course, I'm giving a good look, right? I mean, you don't pass something like that up. You're giving it a good look, and I'm giving it a good look. I'm crawling up on it, sneaking up on it, And what I notice about the arm as I'm looking, because I kept looking, I didn't just go, oh, there's an arm hanging in my living room. Okay. I looked at it, and on the arm up here it looked like a healed bullet wound, like somebody had been shot. This man, it was definitely a man's arm, very muscular, had been shot in his arm, and of course it was healed. So end of thing, I crawl up to it. I'm going to touch it, right? Well, it disappeared. It wasn't touchable, okay? But it was an external vision. So I run in to my husband, who's in bed sleeping and doesn't want to be disturbed by his wife. But I said, Fred, there was an arm hanging in our living room. And it looks like this man, and it looks like he's been shot. What do you think God's trying to say? Go to somebody else when you don't know what to do, right? And my husband very groggily said, pray for him. And so I started praying for this man, that he wouldn't get killed when he got shot, that he would live through it, that the Lord would accelerate the healing. I'm really praying for this man. And this went on from July till September. And all of a sudden, okay, my husband decides he wants to do evangelism. I know I've jumped, but keep with me. So he invites this young man in our church called Spencer Marshall to come to our home and talk about evangelism, because he knew this young man had the gift of evangelism, that he worked on the streets of Binghamton, New York, and he wanted to see how we could advance evangelism in our area. So anyway, usually at that time, we had quite a few people for dinner, for suppers. And I had a large dining room table, and it was all set. And we're having spaghetti and meatballs this night. And guess what? The only people that show up is me, Fred, and Spencer. And so Fred's at one end of the long table. I'm at the other end of the long table, and Spencer's in the middle of the table. And he asked me to pass the sauce to him. Spencer did. And I reached it toward him, but see, he's a little ways away. And he reaches with his arm, and as he does, his t-shirt pulls up on his arm, and lo and behold, it's the bullet wound. And so I look at him and I say, "You've been shot. I've been praying for you." Now get this. He looks at me and he says, "No, Mrs. Hoover, I wasn't shot. That's a bong burn," he says, "but my muscle grew and it got bigger." Okay, you're wondering, what do you do with that? I said, "No, you have to realize I'm an ignorant pastor's wife. What's a bong burn?" And he looked at me and he says, "Well, when you smoke pot and you put it in a pipe," and he said, "We were stupid and we burned ourselves." Okay. So anyway, I thought, okay, whatever that means, right? But as I kept looking and kept looking in the months to come, this young man married my daughter. The Lord was showing me how to pray for my future son-in-law, which of course I took wrong in the beginning. He was gunshot, where I should have been praying against the effects of marijuana in his life and in his brain. And so everyone, you learn as you go. That's what that illustration was about. It's an external vision that I could not fully understand what God was saying to me, but then God added to it and showed me what I needed to be doing and praying. So the next type of vision I want to talk about are mental glimpses. Now you say, what in the world are those? These are these real quick flashes that you get that are mental. They're in your mind, okay, or they can be external. In other words, they can be internal or external, but they're just a real quick mental flash. You need to look and be aware of those, many, many times, like driving a car, I'll get these quite a bit, many times, yes, I don't know what the Lord's saying. I'll be honest with you, but I pray into them when I see them, because I have found this out. I might not know what the Lord's saying, but the Lord knows what he's saying. And my main purpose is prayer. And so I need to pray those back. I don't necessarily have to minister out of those, though I can in situations, okay? Or though you can in situations. So the next one I want to talk about is night visions. And this is something I'm very aware of that I have. Daniel had night visions when he laid upon his bed. Okay, this is not a dream, everyone. This is when you are awake, okay, and you're actually wake up from sleep. You know you're awake and you see an open vision. My first one of these, and I want to tell you how it worked. I was asleep and I woke up to a sense that something was in the bedroom. Now, you might think that that's frightening, but this wasn't a frightening sense, okay? So I sat up in bed, and all of a sudden I see this mylar balloon over by my door, and it's a heart, and it has written on it, "Be my Valentine." So I'm sitting there. Now, this is my first one of these. So I don't know about you, but I talked to myself. I said, be my Valentine. I'm awake, Donna. You're not sleeping. This is not a dream. You're sitting up in bed and you're looking at a balloon that says, be my Valentine. So pretty soon the balloon started drifting toward the ceiling. I said, boy, Lord, you want me to be your Valentine. Okay. Isn't that neat? Only there was more to it. 2 years later, my father had passed away. And on Valentine's Day, I got my inheritance. You know, the Lord, keep looking, everyone. Keep looking. I've had many of these. You'll wake up and you'll be awake and you'll tell yourself, I'm awake, but you'll see things. Another one I saw this baseball hat hanging in my room by my bed. And I'm there, I'm awake. There's a baseball cap and it has the letter P right on the front of this baseball cap. So, of course, dumb that I am, I go to Fred. Fred, there's a baseball cap hanging in our bedroom that has the letter P on it. What do you think the Lord's saying? He says, oh, Donna, that's so easy. You're on the prophetic team. I don't know why sometimes I don't get these things, but it was my baseball cap. I was on the prophetic team and the Lord gave me my hat. So, you'll be aware. Pray into them if you don't understand them, but you'll be aware that you are awake and it's not a dream, but it's night. And usually what it is you'll wake up from a sleep and you'll sense something in the room. And if you look, you're going to see, okay? Now, the ones I have had have been open visions. I would imagine if you look internally, you can see too in night visions. Okay, I want to talk now, before we close, a little about dreams. Maybe I shouldn't talk about dreams yet. We'll talk about dreams. We'll start next week on dreams because they're quite intense. Okay, let me talk about, since we were talking about the visions, let me talk about trances. Trances are like you're there, everyone. Things may be happening around you, but you are no longer just in your living room or just in the church service. You are literally in the picture that the Lord is showing you. Okay. Several years ago, I was in Canada and getting ready for bed, and all of a sudden, the whole atmosphere of the room turned green. And I'm like, uh-oh, this isn't normal. And all of a sudden, in front of me, I saw this man on a cobbler bench. You know what a cobbler bench is? And he was taking from this basket these shoes that needed repaired. And he was ripping off the soles. He was putting on new soles. And what he would do, he would reach in his mouth to get the tacks, and he would put them on the shoe sole, and he would tack them in from the tacks that came out of his mouth. I knew immediately that it was gone. All the green was gone and everything, that the Lord was going to be bringing life-changing move into the world, into the United States, where he would be changing souls, and he would literally hold those souls on people with the power of spoken word, his word. Okay, so that's an example of a trance. Though I was in the room in Canada, everything changed, and I was in the room, but everything changed at that point, and that's called a trance. So I want to close there for right now. Next week, we're going to start to talk about some dreams. Dreams are quite intense, okay? Everyone has dreams. I'm not a big dreamer. I'll warn you, my husband was a big dreamer, but We're going to talk about dreams. We're going to talk about the different kinds of dreams, and we're going to talk about why you have different kinds of dreams starting next week, okay? God bless. I'll see you then. Bye-bye.